One of the first features I wrote was as a student at the Columbia Missourian about this football player, Mike Jones, who used to play for the St. Louis Rams. He's kind of known for making the game winning tackle when they played the Titans in the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
early 2000s. I remember sitting in his office. He was a football coach at a local college in Missouri. My editor sent me there to go get the story and see what he's up to now. I was very nervous. I was maybe 19 or 20 at the time, sitting in his office with this Super Bowl champion, like not knowing if he's going to give me the time of day or treat me
Yeah.
seriously or just kind of brush me off. You never know. But he was so gracious with his time. He was very like appreciative of me even coming to him, which he didn't have to be. And then gave me feedback after. He's just like, you know what? I know you're a young guy, but I thought you went about that the right way. You asked good questions. We're able to kind of unlock some memories for me that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So, I mean, I know you're here to write about me, but I thought you did a great job. And just getting that feedback was, I mean, that meant the world to me as a 20-year-old journalist just trying to make it. I
Yeah.
remember coming back to my newsroom and my editor sat down with him. He thought it was a really good story, and he doesn't really. He was one of those editors that didn't really give out a ton of praise. That was one of those things where you're just like, all right, I might be able to do this like full time. So
Mhm.
having experience like that as a young reporter meant the world to me, and kind of gave me the confidence to keep moving forward with it.
Welcome to Pinnacle Code, where we spotlight high achievers in the culture and decode how they got to where they are today. I'm your host, Ben Arthur. Excited to be joined this week by the homie Colton Pouncy, man. We go back several years at this point. So for some background on him, he is the Detroit Lions beat reporter for The Athletic. He's a rising star in the NFL media business, was recently just honored the 2024 Therese A. Paler Emerging Writer he just Therese A. Paler Emerging Writer Award. Congrats to him on that. But yeah, as I said, he's a rising star in the business. As I alluded to, like we go back several years. We were in the Sports Journalism Institute together 7 years ago, coming out of college, and time really flies. But Colton, thank you so much for joining the show. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty well, man. I think we were talking a little bit earlier. About to have a nice summer break here. The NFL is starting to slow down for this one little 6-week period here. But yeah, things been good, man. We do go way back. Shout out SJI. Can't believe
Yep,
it's been 7 years already, man. We're getting old, but
I know, man.
yeah, no, it's been fun to look back at those moments though. I still remember that summer and just being with the whole crew there. Those were good times for sure.
I know. Yes. Yes. Good times. And even though it was just like a week or two boot camp that we were all there in Columbia, Missouri. I mean, that was I had a blast, and obviously it's good to see where everyone has kind of gone since that point. But yeah, with you, Colton, I kind of wanted to start at the beginning. So I know you're from Chicago. What do people need to know about your upbringing there to understand the guy talking to me today?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything too major with my story. I grew up suburbs of Chicago, born in Chicago, kind of moved out to the suburbs when I was young. Always loved sports. Grew up playing football, basketball, whatnot. Kind of realized at an early age I was not going to play in college or anything like that. Wasn't close to that, but always had that thirst for sports. Was watch every game when I came back from school. Stay up late, listen to the radio or watching the game. So that passion for it was always there. I think it was when I got a little bit older, when I realized I could maybe try to do this, as a career. You get into high school and you kind of, experiment with a few different things. My high school had a journalism TV program that I
Mm,
got involved in a little bit. So I got a chance to see like behind the scenes camera work and things like that. And that always kind of appealed to me at an early age. And then when I was in high school, I kind of, you get brochures sent to you in the mail and whatnot. I got one from the University of Missouri about kind of their Missouri method, where they have faculty that's kind of teaching students, like actual trained journalists, while the students are doing the reporting. And I thought that was such a cool, kind of unique program. So I kind of did more research into that, applied and got in. And yeah, I mean, going to Mizzou kind of changed my life a little bit. Just the program, the number of journalists that have come through that program, successful journalists, like I guess you can't help but try to fall in line and be the
for
next one
sure.
and try to, carve out your own path. So yeah, nothing too crazy growing up, but that was kind of my backstory there.
You mentioned just kind of your affinity to sports growing up. I'm wondering, like, what drew you to the storytelling component of that, right? Because I think a lot of people are maybe interested in sports, but uh, as you are, like, those who know you, like, know you're a really good, like, feature storyteller and whatnot. So what maybe drew you to that part of
Mhm.
kind of the job?
Yeah, I mean, I think I consider myself like a people person. Had a lot of friends growing up, and I just think like it's cool to hear everyone's backstory because everyone has a story. And so the older I got, the more you get into the journalism side of things. You can there are different avenues that you can have in this industry. You can be a stats guy,
Mhm,
breaking news. To me, I love that storytelling and the feature writing aspect because you really get to break things down to its core and figure out what led to a person getting to where they are. And so I think the process of storytelling and starting at the beginning and saying, all right, what was your upbringing like? Tell me like what'd you do growing up? Who were your big influences on your life? Your mentors? What trials and tribulations did you go through to get to where you are now? I always think that's so cool,
mhm.
and you learn a lot about people just along the way. So I think being able to package that for a story to give to an audience to kind of shed some light on who this person is or who their favorite player is, who their favorite coach is. um, just being that bridge between the fan and the team is super cool to me, and something that I kind of got interested in an early age.
Yeah, like for me as well, like feature storytelling, like that aspect of kind of the business we're in has is what I've been most captivated to as well. But I'm curious, Colton, like in your process, because there's a lot of trust that goes involved that is involved in like getting people to open up. I guess what have you learned about like the best ways of getting people to kind of tell their life story to you to trust you, like I maybe they have a little bit of background with you, maybe not, but getting them to really tell kind of everything they've been through. What have you maybe learned about that process in terms of like the best way of getting the subject to open up to you?
Yeah, honestly, I just kind of let them dictate the conversation. I mean, I'll go in with a list of questions that I want to ask them and kind of get off there, but as the interview goes on, like they're going to dictate what information you're getting, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you want to make them feel comfortable, ask open-ended questions. If they say something that kind of piques your interest, double down on that and try to hammer away at that. I think that's usually the best practice for me. I've gotten some of my best interviews and best quotes from just following up and saying, "Oh, can you elaborate on that a little bit more?"
Mhm.
And hey, tell me a little bit more about this. That seems like it was important to you at the time, So like, I think those types of questions are always where you're going to get your best information, rather than the set list that you have going into it. I think it's really cool to kind of be able to deviate from whatever list you had going in and just say, "Hey, let's just see where this conversation goes and what we can get out of it."
Is it easy? Was it easy in the beginning for you to, like, deviate from, like, the question? 'Cause I remember, like,
No,
just at least for yeah, at least for me, right? 'Cause you're so prepared, right? And you have, like, that perfect script, right? And then they say something that kinda throws you off guard. You're
yeah.
like, how what was that process like for you to just learning to be present in an interview and just really listening to what they're saying instead of just looking down at what you have written down of what you need to ask them?
Right. I mean, early on, it was like, someone would give me a great answer and I'd be like, okay, cool, thanks. And I'd go to the next one immediately. And then I'd listen back later and be like, man, why didn't I just follow up on that? Why didn't I just stick with that point? So I think it's just about repetition, like with anything, honestly. Going back and listening to your interviews, I think is really important. Transcribing right after so you can like pick up on what you might have missed and try to double down on that if you can. And just getting that repetition involved, I think that makes you more aware of that in the next interview you might have, being like, okay, well, let's stick on this subject for a little bit longer. So yeah, it just comes with time, I guess. But early on, it was definitely a bit of a challenge for me because you're nervous, you're talking to
Yeah.
someone new for the first time, and you have this set list of questions that you just kind of want to get through one by one. But it is important to kind of listen to the subject and see where that conversation is going for sure.
What were some of the earliest reporting experiences that you had that you think maybe set the foundation for the storyteller that you are now?
Yeah. I think one of the first features I wrote was as a student at the Columbia Missourian, um, about this football player Mike Jones, who used to play for the St. Louis Rams, and he's kind of known for making the game-winning tackle when they played the Titans in the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
early 2000s. Um, and that play saved the game for them. It won them the Super Bowl, and he's still kind of a legend to this day because of it. And I remember sitting in his office. He was a football coach at a local college in Missouri, and I think it was maybe the 15-year anniversary or something like that at the time. And my editor sent me there to go get the story and see what he's up to now. And I was very nervous. I was maybe, I don't even know, like 19 or 20 at the time, sitting in his office of this, Super Bowl champion, like not knowing if he's going to give me the time of day or treat me
Yeah.
seriously or just kind of brush me off. You never know. But he was so gracious with his time. He was very like appreciative of me even coming to him, which he didn't have to be. I'm sure he's gotten interview requests every year.
Mhm.
Um, but the time that he took with me as a young reporter was very gracious with that. Gave me great answers, and then gave me feedback after. He's just like, you know what? I know you're a young guy, but I thought you went about that the right way. You asked
Mhm.
good questions. We're able to kind of unlock some memories for me that I hadn't thought about in a long time. So I mean, I know you're here to write about me, but I thought you did a great job. And just getting that feedback was, I mean, that meant the world to me as a 20-year-old journalist just trying to make it.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of write that story, just kind of what he's been up to, life after that play, um, and really just kind of break down like everything that he went through as a player, and try to portray that to our readers. And I remember coming back to my newsroom, and my editor sat down with him, and he thought it was a really good story. And he was one of those editors that didn't really give out a ton of praise. You kind of had
Yeah,
to like pull it out of him.
for sure.
But I got some feedback, and he liked the story, and that was one of those things where you're just like, all right, I might be able to do this like full time. So
Mhm.
having an experience like that as a young reporter meant the world to me, and kind of gave me the confidence to keep moving forward with it.
Okay. And I guess maybe beyond that, Colton, what what has been your favorite reporting? I mean, you've been in it. We got out of SJI 7 years ago.
Yeah.
What has maybe been your favorite reporting experience to this point, and why? It could be maybe an event. It could be a particular story. What is that one thing for you, and maybe why is that?
Yeah, I think it's stories where I've gotten to dive first, head first into the subject and the topic. Um, I think one of the first stories I wrote when I got on the Michigan State beat at the Athletic, it was about June 2018, July 2018, around that time. Um, there wasn't much going on in college athletics, when in the summer when I first got there.
Mhm.
So I was trying to look for story ideas and something cool that could kind of, give me a lay of the land. And so one of the first things I did was I kind of hopped around different bars and restaurants in East Lansing and Lansing, and just talking to like the restaurant owners, the bartenders, the
Mhm.
servers that have been there for a while, and just ask like, "Hey, what's your favorite game day experience? Just being at the bar during a Michigan State game in the fall. Your favorite memories from over the years.
Mhm.
If you're a Michigan State fan, like, what's your favorite memory as a fan?" And that was a really cool story for me because I got to learn a lot about just what the locals are into and what their experiences have been like, as an outsider that didn't grow up in Michigan, didn't go to Michigan State, wasn't a fan growing up. So,
Mhm.
um, getting to hear their stories and putting it together in a story of my own to kind of give to our readers, I thought that was really cool, and I think our readers really liked it, and kind of let them know that, hey, I'm taking this seriously. I want to be invested in this. I want to dive headfirst and tell your stories. There's another time, I think that same year, Michigan State was playing Michigan, and I think during rivalry week, there's this thing where there's a Spartan statue on Michigan State's campus,
Okay.
and Michigan fans over the years have tried to like spray paint or like vandalize it a little bit just during that rivalry week. And so the marching band at Michigan State now, probably like I think 60 years they've done this. They kind of get together, they camp out, they like tell stories and whatnot, but they are on watch. So they guard the Sparty statue on campus, um, and they try to protect it from Michigan fans. But so it's become, that's how it started really, but it's become this like team building experience for all these freshmen that are just involved in marching band for the first time. For seniors, like they've met lifelong friends at this very event when they were freshmen. Now 3 years later, about to graduate, they're still at it and they're still friends, and that's a lifelong memory for them. So I spent like a few hours with them, probably like 12 a.m. to like 3 a.m. just kind of asking them
Wow.
stories and just being out there with them. And I don't know, it was really important for me to kind of dive headfirst into it and get to know these stories on a personal level.
Yeah.
That's kind of I've always tried to go like above and beyond that way because I think you can get some really good stuff when you take that extra step. So that's kind of been my approach to journalism, and those are some stories I'm proud of for sure.
Yeah, both of those examples, Colton, I think show like just your desire to like really get into the community and find a connection like with the fan base. I guess why do you believe maybe that's so important? Because I think sometimes like with the job, it could just be so what's the right way to say like just so singular and just like trying to tell a story.
It can be robotic
And
sometimes,
yeah,
honestly.
it could be very robotic at times, especially with what the business has become. But I think as you've alluded to, like some of your best stories are you like really taking that step to hear what the community is saying about a particular subject or whatever. Why do you believe that maybe not just for you, but it just in general is so important for people in the journalism business to embrace?
Yeah, I think when you get in this industry, sometimes like it's easy to just kind of go through the motions. But at the same time, like we are here to serve our readership. Um, these are the people that either subscribe to read us or, we want them reading our stories and supporting us. So I think the best way to do that is kind of, you know, tap into their mind and see what they want to read about. And I kind of think to myself, like as a fan, like of Chicago sports growing up and whatnot, like what I would like to read about my team. And a lot
Mhm,
of that is behind the scenes stuff, cultural traditions I didn't know about, cool things that you can't just get from a box score. And so that's how I've always tried to like approach the job. And I try to connect with the fan base as much as possible. I think I did that with Michigan State. I think I'm kind of doing that with Lions fans now, even though I'm an outsider. And I think you can just do that by going the extra step and putting in the extra work, making the extra phone call, going to that event when you're
mhm.
tired. I understand like our job is a grind, but if you have the time and the energy to put in that extra step, you should do it every single time because you can always get good stuff out of it. So, yeah, man, I just think at the end of the day, fans are what support us and what keep us going. And so if you have a chance to tell them a story that they haven't heard before or, something that they haven't heard about in a long time and kind of rehash that for them and unlock some memories, that's always a cool thing to do. They'll appreciate that and they'll come back to read you again. So that's kind of how I've gone about that.
Speaking of taking that extra step, what specifically has that looked like in Detroit? Is that going to like certain fan events when you can? Is it engaging with fans on X in a particular way? Like how when you say like try to get kind of like that feedback, like how do you maybe go about that to inform the work you do?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. I try to be pretty open and accessible on X and Twitter, and trying to just create that environment for them where they feel like they can ask me a question, like tweet at me and you'll get a response, or same thing in the comment sections of our stories. Like I try to engage with them and let them know, hey, this is a community. Like you have a question for me, I'll try to get back to you. Um, I think that's worked out because a lot of comment sections are pretty nasty sometimes, but I feel like even on Michigan State, like they've been pretty cool with me because I think part of that is because they understand what kind of environment. I try to set the tone and be like, hey, this is going to be an open forum, where you're going to get a response. Let's be respectful of each other. So between Michigan State and Lions, I feel like I've kind of helped cultivate that environment, which is cool. But yeah, in terms of going the extra step, it's hey, I have a couple sources already on the story, some good background, got some good color for my story, but let me just call this guy's like high school coach, or let me call this
Mhm.
assistant and try to get the extra scoop there. And honestly, like making that extra call, it can help you get some really good stuff, man. Like I think people underestimate that aspect, but whenever you think you have enough, ask yourself, like, can I go above and beyond?
Mhm.
Can I make that one extra call? Can I go to one extra event? And more often than not, you'll be happy you did. That's kind of how I've gone about things, and just things that have worked for me in the past. It's been really cool to kind of look back on that and be like, I'm really glad I did that. I'm really glad I made that extra call. I'm really glad I went to that.
Yeah. Colton, for those kind of coming up who like look like you and me, like younger black people about who want to like maybe get into this space, what advice would you give to them about kind of what it takes to not only get in this space, but to kind of stay in it for the long haul, do you think?
Yeah, I think, guys like us, people that look like us, you got to work twice as hard because, I think there's bias in hiring practices, and when an industry is predominantly white and you have leaders that are predominantly white, sometimes they're just going to hire from their own network, which just might be other white people or whatever. And so I think for black journalists and people like us, you do have to kind of work twice as hard to make a name for yourself, to get your work out there, so that you can be, that next hire. And then once you get that opportunity, there's a little bit of pressure on you to kind of make sure you
Mhm.
don't ruin that for the next person, because that's the other thing. If there might be a white journalist that gets a job and doesn't do great, but he can get hired somewhere else, and it doesn't mean anything for the next person that gets that job. But it might be for a black journalist. If that happens, it's maybe you pivot away from that and you don't kind of look to that well again. So I do feel like there's a sense of like, you know you want to do right for the next person. You want to make a good name for yourself, and let people know, like, get out of your bias. Like, if there's a you know target that young black journalist, target that writer that you maybe aren't looking at, but if you give them a chance, I guarantee you, more often than not, they'll prove you right, and you'll look pretty smart for making that hire. So I
For
think,
sure.
but I do think that's part of our industry, right? Like, we know what the numbers look like. So when we get that job, when we get that opportunity, we got to make the most of it for the next guy coming up behind us.
For sure. Yeah, and just to kinda add to that, like, I think for me, like, something I try to tell people, like, if they ask is, like, just really trying to network, build relationships with kind of these white editors, these white hiring managers, just being as in their face as we possibly can, because they don't
Mhm.
inherently like look for us,
Yeah.
right? So I think we have to take that proactive step. But then also I think just once we're in it, and just for you and me, like being in the NFL space in particular, I think it's a tremendous advantage when you look like us, when we're actually in the locker room, because I think guys can relate to us. And that doesn't mean just, a guy will give you something because you're black, but I think there's a greater sense of comfort that
Yeah.
if you cultivate it, it could really work to your advantage. I'm wondering, like, has that maybe been your experience as well? Just being the way you look, maybe you like some of the music or have some of the interests that they have. Like, has that been able to maybe benefit you at all, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being in your 20s and being a black journalist in an NFL locker room is absolutely an advantage. Like you kind of mentioned. I feel like guys open up to me. I feel like they're comfortable talking to me. It's not as buttoned up as they might be to someone else. We can kind of, peel back the curtain and have a real conversation. And I think that's so cool. It's kind of this secret superpower that we have, when we're in the locker
Mhm.
room, when we're kind of, navigating that. I've had 2 years in the Lions locker room now. I feel like I've developed some really strong relationships with the guys in that group. It's a really young team, so I think that kind of helps.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like they kind of know me, and some of them follow me on Twitter, and they kind of get my sense of humor and things like that. So, going back to just making yourself known to people, and then once you get in that locker room, build those relationships. Like, you can bond with them over music or sports or whatever it is. Build that connection, and use it to your advantage, because again, as black journalists, we kind of need every advantage that we can get out there, and I think this is definitely one of them for sure.
For sure. And I'm curious, Colton, what, because there's a lot going on in our industry, right? Like in terms of cutbacks and financial constraints and all that. So like for those who do look at us and say, like, I kind of want to do what they're doing, but like what why should someone, a younger person, be optimistic about wanting to get into this space? Like, what frame of mind would you encourage a younger person to have about kind of getting into this space, and the way they should look at it, just knowing the instability of this business at the moment? What would you maybe tell a younger person?
Yeah, I think you have to be honest with them and say, like, look, this industry isn't what it was 20, 30 years ago, and even when I got into space, it's a little bit different. But um, I think there are more opportunities for younger journalists too at the same time. Like even when we were coming up in 2017, um, I remember trying to maybe apply for a college beat and being told, "Oh, we want someone with more experience." Nowadays, you see like 22, 23-year-old journalists getting those opportunities, right at college. And they're looking for the next up and coming talented writer. So I think you can fast track your career nowadays more than you could even 7 years ago when we were coming out. So, I think those are good opportunities that if you get one of them, you can take it and run with it. My guy Joel Lorenzi, he's an SJI student. Um, he did SJI. He got an internship, I believe, at the Houston Chronicle, and then got a job covering Creighton basketball. And he
Mm.
did that for a year, and now he's covering, the Thunder. And he had a playoff run, and he won a Rising Star Award in the Basketball Writers Association. So, like, I look at a guy like that, and I'm just like, there are opportunities for young journalists out here if you put in the work, if you're saying yes to everything, if you're making yourself, indispensable for a newsroom. So I think those opportunities are out there. I know the industry is kind of daunting. I know when you see layoffs here and there, it's kind of like, oh, you got to think about the future, right? I totally understand that. But um, if you're passionate about the job, if you can do the work, um, I think more often than not, you'll be able to stick in this industry and carve out a really nice career for yourself.
Does the instability of this industry at all sway your desire to wanna stay in it for the long haul at all?
I think you think about it sometimes. It's hard not to, but you know, I think you got to trust the work that you put in. I think I'm pretty confident in the journalist that I am, the journalist I become. Maybe years ago I wouldn't have said that, but I think I've kind of positioned myself to be in a good spot at this point, and I've done that just by putting in the work. I think, and saying yes to everything, and connecting with an audience. And I think if you can do those things, you'll be able to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fact, and I think something I had a conversation with Adam Schefter just kind of about that too, him being like the king he is in terms of at least with breaking news,
Mhm.
and he said like he said, like, good work stands out. Like, it doesn't matter, like no one knows, like he doesn't even know where this industry is going, but as long as you produce that good work, there's always gonna be a place for you, and it may look different 10, 15 years from now, but as long as you kind of stick to that, there's going to be something for you, because if you're talented and you're valuable, you're always going to have something to lean on.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. And so just so you covered Michigan State for what, like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Michigan State basketball and football, and covering the Lions now. I feel like you started covering the Lions in 22, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, they were still kind of like on the struggle bus,
hmm
and now they're at a point to where they're like a Super Bowl contender. I'm curious, what has been your experience like being, um, coming into a situation where a team is a perennial loser, and then there's this culture shift and some good draft classes, and all of a sudden they could be one of those teams that just have a dominant run for the next like 5+ years potentially. What has that experience been like for you on the ground, being able to document a franchise that's kind of been on this upward trajectory?
It's even crazy to hear you say that because when I first got on the beat, those were not the vibes at all. Um, Back then, 2022 was my first season, and they were coming off a 3-13-1 season. Dan Campbell was that was the start of his second year. Brad Holmes, the GM, started his second year. So there was optimism that they could be better than that 3-13-1 season, but at the same time, they got off to a 1-6 start that year. And I think there were calls for maybe, oh, is Dan Campbell going to get fired? Do Lions have to go through a coaching search again, like so early into this thing? And I think back then, a lot of people thought Campbell was still like this meathead. The kneecap
Yeah, kneecap
quote was
fighter.
still like
Yeah.
viral. Yeah, yeah. So that's all people kind of knew him for at the time. And so a lot of people were just like, oh, this guy's not cut out for the job. The Lions aren't going to win anything. There's going to be the losers that they've always been. But I think just being on the ground floor, you kind of saw things differently. You saw, okay, when these guys got here in 2021, they stripped this roster to its studs, right? Like they got rid of aging veterans, locker room cancers. They didn't want those guys. Like they had this policy where they didn't want guys that weren't going to be great culture fits. So they really had to break it down and rebuild it back up, and that was going to take time. So I think the 3-13-1 season was kind of expected. You hope that there was more for 2022, but didn't start that way. But the thing that kind of stuck to me during that time was Dan Campbell never lost that locker room. Those guys were still hanging on every single word he said. He kept telling them it was only a matter of time. It's not like they were losing games by like 30 points. The losses that they were losing by was maybe 5, 6, 3, 1.
Mhm.
So they were right there. The results just weren't there. So they really came that second half of the season. Young players started to emerge. They started to get their footing, and they finished that year 8-2 in their last 10 games, and they finished 9-8 overall. Just missed the playoffs, but I think that kind of set them up for what was to come the following
Mhm.
year. And I almost think like not making the playoffs because they were very close. Um, I believe the Seahawks had lost in Week 18 that
They would have
year.
been in, yeah, that
They would have
22.
been in,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I almost think like that served as motivation for them because a lot of people were ready to anoint them as like the next big thing, even last offseason. And
Mhm.
they could always point back to, hey, we didn't even make the playoffs. Like we have so much that we want to accomplish. Like we're trying to stick in the moment here. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So I almost think that grounded them a little bit and gave them some perspective on it. And it helped them kind of, have this breakout year where they go 12-5. They win their first division title in 30 years. I wasn't born the last time they won a division title. A lot of people weren't that grew up watching this team. Um, they get to the playoffs, they win their first playoff game in 32 years. So to be in the city during a run like that and to get to document it for all those people, that's why I go back to saying like we're kind of the bridge between the team and the fan base. And being that bridge for a year like that was so special. And it was hard not to get wrapped up in, everything that was going on in Detroit. You had people chanting Jared Goff's name at random events all over the state. You saw all the Lions gear at the grocery store and whatnot. Like it was really cool to be in Detroit for a moment like that and something that I think is really cool. And I mean, who knows? They might even be even better and win it all this year.
For sure. Yeah, I'm definitely high on them, one of my favorite teams to watch. Um, so Colton, I'm curious, what do you think has been your biggest failure to this point in your career, or a pitfall, some kind of setback? And whatever that was, what do you think it took to get past that?
Oof. Biggest failure.
And it doesn't have
Um,
to be super dramatic too, like it could.
yeah. Now I'm thinking about that. I mean, I think in college there were times where I was doubting myself as a journalist.
In college, you
In
said?
college, yeah.
Mhm.
You know, as a young writer, I think I mentioned that Mike Jones story, but even before then, like I didn't know if I was gonna make it as a writer in this industry. Like I had
Mm.
doubted myself. I didn't think I was good. You have like this imposter syndrome sometimes, and you never know where this industry is going to take you, right? And so I think there were times when I was in college where I was just like, I don't know if I'm made for this. And then you get to SJI and you see all the talented people there. I mean, in our class, like that was a
Right.
stat class, honestly. And then you're just like, man, I hope I'm good enough. So there were
Mhm.
times where I just doubted myself throughout the years and saying like, I mean, I want to go far in this industry. I want to make it, but you know, there's some self-doubt along the way. And, I don't even know what it was that kind of kept me in it. I think it was just kind of putting my head down and working and trying to prove myself. But there's definitely some times along the way where you're just like, I don't know, you just that doubt keeps in the back of your
Mhm.
mind. It kind of consumes you at times. And I mean, it's hard to get yourself out of a rut like that when you're stuck in it. But um, yeah, there are times like that kind of ate away at me. But um, I think I've kind of found my footing in this industry a little bit and hope I'm making, the crew at SGI proud and, parents and whatnot and friends that kind of follow my career. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just about kind of getting yourself out of the darkness sometimes when it comes your way.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, absolutely, you're making people proud, and I had the same feelings going into SJI too, because I went to a school that didn't have a journalism program, uh, so that there was that, and then I
Mhm.
didn't get into journalism until like my junior year, and then the year
Yeah,
after that I was in SJI. So there was all I had the same kind of feelings, but I think for me, and I guess it's kind of similar to what you said, like I think I just outworked my self doubt.
yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
like you said, it could be kind of a dark place, but I think if you keep like producing, then you have like a stack of proof that like, okay, like I can actually do it, and that kind of keeps you going. So
Yeah, for sure.
that was kind of my approach to that. So
And
so
you're
yeah,
killing it,
appreciate.
man. It's been so cool to see everything you've done in this industry, and like I read your stuff all the time, and I think you're killing it, man. Like you're doing a great job.
I appreciate it, man. And this is supposed to be about you, and you're trying to
Ah,
turn it on
oh
me.
man.
So no, no, I'm messing with you. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But yeah, Colton, kind of winding down here. I guess where can people go to maybe learn more about not only your story, but also just to keep tab on your Lions coverage with Athletic?
Yeah, yeah. The Lions tab on the Athletic app, you can go to that, or I think I have a link in my Twitter account at Colton Pouncy, Colton_Pouncy. Um, and yeah, yeah, that's probably the best way to follow my work. All my stories will show up there. Um, so yeah, that's about it, I
Okay,
think.
cool. And last one for you. This is something I ask all my guests at the end, and it's somewhat broad, so bear with me. But what is one thing that you believe people can do more of to get a step closer to reaching like their pinnacle, or to maximizing their personal potential?
Yeah, I think something that helped me was kind of mapping out where I want to be, you know, within a few years, and kind of just going through that every couple of years. I think instead of 5 years, 10 years, I try to do it like every couple of years, kind of reset like what I want to do in this industry. I remember having conversations with mentors about that, which really kind of helped me. But yeah, figure out what you want to do. You know, break it down to its core. Figure out when you want to get there, when that might be realistic for you, and don't lose sight of that. Like for me, I kind of knew I wanted to cover the NFL and be an NFL writer. I didn't know when it would happen, and I didn't try to force it. You know, when I was at the Tennessee and working there, I got my internship and then was hired full time. Um, by the end of my tenure there, like I want to say it was like April or May, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to cover the Titans?" And I was covering a small FCS school, Austin P State
Hmm.
University at the time, so that would have been a great bump for me. Um, but instead of taking that job, I ended up going to the Athletic to cover Michigan State. And, you know, skipping an NFL beat at age 23 is probably something that people wouldn't do. But for me, I was focusing long term. I was looking at the Athletic and saying, that's a place I want to be. I don't care how long it gets me, to what I want to do ultimately, but
Mm.
getting in on the ground floor with something like that is what I want to do. So kind of ranking your priorities and kind of figuring out like what's a good fit for you, I think is really important. That all worked out for me because I spent 4 years on Michigan State. I really got to learn the craft of beat writing, I think, on
Hmm.
that job more than anything. I think that helped me set up for, my first 2 years on Lions beat and kind of getting in that NFL locker room and kind of, taking what I had learned on other beats and putting it towards that finally I got the NFL opportunity. I was ready for it at that time.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been ready for it at 23.
Hmm.
Um, so it's important to map out where you want to be, but also you got to make some choices for yourself and figure out what's the best thing for you at the same time. So I would say combine those two, and that's how you get to where you want to be. It worked for me, and I think it worked for a lot of other people as well.
Going off of that real quick, when you talk about like mapping out where you want to be, how do you hold yourself accountable to that plan you've laid out? Like, or I guess how did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I looked around other people that were doing the job and said, "Well, I wonder what got them there." And I would read their work, and you're like, "Oh, they're going above and beyond. They're doing the extra step. They got noticed that way." Because I think it's very easy in this industry to just go to a game, write a recap, put some stats in a story, go through the motions. But like the people that I looked up to were writing features. They were talking to people that not everyone was talking to. They're
Mhm.
making the extra call. And so I think if you can figure out what that is in your industry, if you can pinpoint that extra step and you can incorporate it into, your own, daily practices, over time, that's just going to be who you are. That's just going to be a part of you and the work that you put in, and you'll get noticed for that. And so I think that's what I try to do with myself. And, um, in an industry like this, it's kind of hard to differentiate yourself from the competition and from other peers. Um, but if you can do that, if you can carve out a lane and kind of pick and choose what works for you, put it into practice every day, eventually people are going to catch on and say, "Hey, this guy knows what he's doing," or "Hey, he's looking pretty good here. Let's see what he can do. Give him an opportunity." So, yeah, that's what worked for me, I think, and I think it can work for others for sure.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Colton, and appreciate all of you all for listening, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, for tuning in to this week's episode of Pinnacle Code. Hope you guys enjoyed, and please subscribe, share, and again, the support means a ton. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week, 5 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday. You guys know the deal. Until next week, I'll see you guys soon. Peace out.